Phil, can you hear me?
No, sir, you are on mute. Can you please unmute?
Hello, Phil, can you hear me? You are now on mute, Phil.
Yes, I hear you.
Okay, fine. So now with this, what we would like to do this, the session which we are going to be, it is more of a very frank, open discussion on whatever we have deliberated since yesterday on the benefit of science and industry in collaborating towards the greening of India, and eventually the final product is going to be for an industrial partner is a Make in India products. If we can get into science-based policy and Make in India products. So what we feel that yesterday we started getting one or two paragraphs or line thoughts by different people on what they feel that what they gain from here and what we should have a brief recommendation which can be further forwarded to the ministry and the people to have a thinking on that. So Phil, if you wish to tell something, you can start with that and then we can circulate very briefly, we can do and then get into that.
National Physical Laboratory, the Metrology Laboratory. I work closely with the U.S. Metrology Laboratory, National Institute of Standards and Technology. James Whetstone, Dr. James Whetstone there, who's been a leader of the greenhouse gas measurement program at NIAS, and working closely also with National Physical Laboratory in the UK and other places around the world. One of the things we recognize in relation to this topic is we have a very good system for calibrating the concentration measurements that we make. We have a scale and we have standards, and this is an evolving thing, but it's very mature and serves the community very well. But one of the things that comes next is if we're going to use measurements, we're going to use concentration measurements, analyze them for the kinds of things that Amina Goddison and Alistair Manning and Steve Monska's group and NOAA also do, which is inverse model analysis of the gradients of concentration in the atmosphere. It would be good if we could begin to have not just not a one-size-fits-all approach, but to develop some skills, standards for how we go from concentration measurements that are well calibrated to top-down emission estimates that can also be understood with respect to each other. So not just kilograms, but kilogram per meter squared per second as well. The emissions, the fluxes. That's one thought. The other thought is, and I'm going to share my screen now, if I can. Let's see. Hopefully you see my screen, yes? You see it? Okay. Maybe recall this figure from yesterday, a version of it anyway. Can you see this figure?
Yes.
Okay. So, when you look, in terms of partnering with industry, Ravi talked about this and others talked about how you see the dots represent where measurements are being made, and the shading represents the sensitivity to emissions based on those measurement nodes. And of course, we see large regions of the world with no top-down sensitivity, measurements and sensitivity to emissions. And when we think about what India might do, I look at this region of the world and I don't stop at the borders of India. when I think about what India might do, first of all, I think about how could India, who in this part of the world is, and in fact the whole world, is one of the leaders in atmospheric sciences, has been, this was one of the exciting motivations for this meeting, is the grand history of India's leadership in the field of atmospheric sciences and meteorology. And so you might imagine that whatever might come forward as a program, it's not just what could be done inside the subcontinent of India, but for this whole region of the world that is in need of this kind of capability. So that's one other thought. And then the additional thought is, when we think about exactly where we might place a new measurement, anywhere in the world, in Africa, in South America, in Asia, in Oceania, you have to start to think, well, we don't have infinite buckets of money, but we're hoping to have some resources for this kind of work. And how could we optimize, both in terms of the operational system simulation experiments we might do, looking at footprint analysis based on a potential node of measurement. But also we might begin to use other sources of information to have a good first guess of where the big emissions might be. We did a study recently that will be published soon, and I will share it after the meeting with the whole group. By the way, Ufran, we should have a mailing list. We should create a email mailing list.
Yeah, we have.
Going forward, and maybe a Google Drive to share documents. But this paper was a study of trade data, looking at trade in appliances and gases. And based on the trade data, we were trying to say, here's the places where we see potential hotspots of emissions of F-gases based on the trade data. And this final thought before I turn the microphone back over to you, Gufran, is one way to collaborate with industry is to improve our ability to understand that kind of data and to get access to that kind of data and to work together collaboratively to improve the competitiveness of industry by having better emission information, and also to guide us when we think about where we might go first in filling gaps in the current top-down capabilities that we have globally. So those are three things: the standards, transferring standards, the kind of information that we can share back and forth to help us optimize where we go first with new measurements. And I'm sorry, I'm blanking on my third one, but there was a third one and I'll remember what it was. Okay, but one other thing I'd like to make sure that Ufran, you can please, I'll stop sharing my slides now and I'll think about what the third one was and I'll remind myself. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so what I can take our message from here is that we will start from our industrial partners. You must have heard a lot of things named deep science since yesterday onwards, but in a very simplistic way, we would like to know from you that you heard us since yesterday morning. What really the information in the light of all what we did, you wish us to do, what way you would like to partner is and which gets benefited to you in the light of what we heard about it. So can we call upon back-end representative and then express your views?
I'm sorry, I just joined us.
Oh, okay. So he just came. So maybe Voltas representative and from Godrej, I think he can get the chance. So you can start from Godrej.
Yes. I have a comment on fees.
Huh?
I have a comment on fees.
After the
Yeah, so good morning, everybody. My name is Jasmeet Singh. I'm from Godrej. So first of all, thank you for the opportunity, giving opportunity to me for this space. Yeah. So I apologize for my bad throat. So please. So I would like to basically touch upon use of hydrocarbons and our experience in using that refrigerant in ECs and refrigerators. So we know cooling demand is projected to grow around 8 times by 2030, 37-38 as compared to 2017-18 as a baseline. Building sector cooling demand show most significant growth at 11 times as compared to baseline. Out of this, room AC is the more than 50%. So it becomes very important basically to use the altered refrigerant for room AC. At present, industry is using HFC, which is R32, which is widely being used in room ACs. And HFC phase out will start somewhere 2028 because that will be the freezing volume or quantity. Considering this phase out plan, we in Godrej already basically changed over from HFC to HC 100% in refrigerator. We started that in 2005. And now all our refrigerator production is in R290 only. We started using SC in AC also from 2012. We did this with the help of technical support from GIZ Germany and our ozone cell in MOEFC. So we did a lot of studies regarding the safety aspect of using hydrocarbon in ACs. And we found some major benefits of using carbon ACs are mainly one is hydrocarbons GWP is almost negligible. Second is performance value, which is better than HFC. Efficiency is improving somewhere around close to 10%. So with this, we can reduce the energy consumption in future in our ACs. Similarly, this required almost 40% lesser volume as compared to HFC. So with this, actually, we can reduce the overall refrigerant release in the atmosphere. Further, this is a low pressure gas, so chances of leakage are also reduced because of the low pressure. Low charge quantity will further benefit basically to reduce our heat exchanger diameters and overall material content in that. But we have some few challenges because of that it is not basically as of now it is not cost competitive where we need actually help from the policy makers or government. One is charge quantity is limited because of the safety issue. Beyond 368 gram as of now, we are not charging. So up to 1.5 ton models we can easily manage, but beyond that, 2 ton models we can't produce in HC as of now. But IEC has already proposed to increase this quantity to 1 kg with some basically design interventions. So that proposal is basically under study, and maybe that will finalize in another couple of months. Second issue is basically we need the trained manpower in this case because gas is highly flammable. So in Godrej, actually we trained our own manpower for the installation. We had our vocational training centers. We tied up with the ITIs for that training. Other major issues, the availability and cost of the basically mainly is the refrigerant, because in locally it is not available. If it is available, that is not purity is the issue in that case. So we are importing that. Similarly, compressor, because as of now, majority industries are using R32, so focus of the manufacturer is not on R290 compressors. So that make it basically compressors are not that much efficient, and cost is also high. So these two factors basically make this slightly commercially unviable. But still, in our portfolio, we are around 20 to 25%. We are using R290 gas. So, recommendation point of view, I would recommend basically if policymaker can basically put some additional incentives for making the compressors and gas in India under Make in India and PLI scheme. There, it is there, but I think because if that will be common, then this gas cannot be further promoted. So to basically promote this gas further, additional incentives are required. Other is basically we should bring the focus of using HC so that other universities and research institutes can further do the study on this and basically make the further solutions for the safety issues or further basically performance improvement. Apart from that, regular improvements in other parts like heat exchangers, motors, that is common to all other things, all other basically gases. Apart from that, if we have research institutes, research organizations or universities can develop some other alternative basically refrigerant, that will be an additional advantage. But as of now, I think immediate solution is HC only. So this is that's it from my side basically for this recommendation and the issue points. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Can now we listen to Dakin? Restrict your comments to 3 to 5 minutes so that we can hear everybody's viewpoints.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry I was late because I had some meeting. Thank you once again for the opportunity. I think I've covered my points largely yesterday, but just to re-emphasize what I said in a broad manner, I think, see, refrigerant is an option, but giving affordability in terms of air conditioner through a sustainable solution is largely a solution which all of us look at. I think someone mentioned yesterday, and I supplement that refrigerant contributes to 7 to 8% or 10% in energy efficiency only. The rest of the parameters largely depend on the components, namely heat exchanger, motor, compressor, and the overall design. If we look at these 4 or 5 components and make that affordable to consumers, it can solve the problem of the penetration of ACs and largely also to energy efficiency, which can indirectly contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. The point where I touched upon yesterday was about procurement. I think a couple of organizations like ESL, etc., and some of the DISCOMs also did some small pilots, but eventually I have no hesitation to say it drastically failed. So as a group of thought leaders, I think it's high time for us to collaborate in a way and capture low-hanging fruits as early as possible so that we can contribute to the society, and bulk procurement is one of the options. And I'm surprised to see that we were talking about 9 million market for AC yesterday, which India is projecting this financial year. There is no, skilled technicians. Still, largely there is a big gap because these technicians primarily come from villages, earn for 3-4 months and eventually go back to their fields. So that's really a problem for us. So every organization, not only Daikin, is doing all their efforts, but I think we need to develop some policy for them also. It's high time for all of us to think from their side also. There is no security for them. There is no medical insurance for them. There is no incentive for them. So we have to give them lucrative offers to retain within the industry and tell them, yes, we are there not as manufacturers. Of course, we are doing a lot of efforts, but as policymakers, as academia, as NGOs, I think it's high time to do that. And as my colleague also mentioned, it's a scarcity of skilled technicians. So these issues will actually lead to a lot of cases which have been reported in the media very recently. When we talk about, a house burn due to explosion in air conditioning, but no brand, no refrigerant is being captured. So, I would say the sometimes we are also blamed for that, but sometimes probably it's a fault of the installation, which nobody knows. So we need to think on developing some policies from the technician side, and also give them some security. And bulk procurement I already touched upon. And I think when I talk about affordability, it's high time for us to think on using reclaimed refrigerant. The cost of virgin refrigerant is getting higher and higher, regardless of any refrigerant. Of course, we talk about HCFCs and high GWP HFCs. It is definitely going higher as per my data. So why not shift from virgin refrigerants to, reclaimed refrigerant, where the quality is almost 99.9%. But eventually it has to come from the holistic point of view, from all the policymaker side. And last but not the least, AC is still considered to be a luxurious item. I think it's high time for us to think on some incentives on air conditioner. I would not say look at 2-star, 3-star, but I would urge and put my comment here to look at least on 5-star inverters, to bring down the GST at least from 28 to 18%, to actually make them affordable. Because right now, I remember 5-star proportion at this point in time is about 18 to 20%, whereas largely 3-star contributes to about 75% still. So I think we need to look at that way also, to increase the proportion of 5-star. I think incentivization is a very good example. Not always, but for the time being, so that market shift is possible in that direction. So these are my couple of points which I wanted to put on. Thank you so much for hearing me. Thanks.
Thank you. Briefly about Voltas.
We don't have anybody from Voltas.
Okay. Then who left out is Carrier.
Blue Star was there.
Yeah, he's
He left.
2 days.
And
Carrier. Yeah. So Carrier.
Yeah, good morning everyone. Sunil here again. Thank you very much for all the valuable inputs and the comments and the suggestions and discussions what we are having over the last couple of days. It's been really enlightening and engrossing. So I would like to summarize a few points and probably leave the audience with some of our thoughts in the end.
Currently, when we look at, basically we wanted to know what exactly you would want a academic, this research community to fill the gap, and what are your expectations?
Yeah, sure. So we would look at a comprehensive and holistic approach here in putting up what the industry requires, or what are the expectations from the industry. This is about considering an unified and collaborative approach, as all of us were talking. We have larger issues to address with regard to the fight against global warming, policy making with regard to CHG and ODS substances. Now, this is a multi-pronged fight. There are different kinds of recommendations on which all of us need to work on. This is particularly not limited to leaks or emissions or HFCs on the whole. So the recommendations where manufacturers are expected to contribute, while the designers of the world and all of us have different avenues to look at cooling loads, designs, natural cooling. This is one aspect. Second is coming to what we have on the manufacturing side. We have to harmonize product efficiencies with low GWP refrigerants. At the same time, does not increase or does not deplete resources and does not increase cost to the customer. So for this, what we require is, like our friends were telling, we would require incentives on the industry, definitely. Regulations with regard to what government and policymakers could support. As we get into the HPMP phase 2 management plan, we still have HCFC product leakages which is coming into India. There are players who try to import in machines without refrigerants because it's not allowed in other countries, but then you fill in the refrigerants. All these things go on in the industry. So this regulations with regard to mandatory audits, compliance would definitely help prevent such measures, because this is a big responsibility to the industry as well as to the community. This is one. Second is, when we are fostering on innovation on refrigerants, we also have challenge of IPR, intellectual property rights, and definitely what funding and finance will go into the refrigerant. We also have to be mindful about the standards on classification of safety as per ASHRAE. These are quite a challenges, while the companies are willing to invest in terms of R&D. This is where we would require support on fostering the innovation forward. So while we are working on, as I said, and most of us have got alternative refrigerants in the domain. The air conditioning industry, broadly if you classify, we are working on multiple refrigerants, because every product category, when it comes to a commercial equipment, the choice of refrigerants would be different, because the system pressures are different. For light commercial equipments, that would be different. For residential air conditioners, that would be again different. So the challenges and the opportunities for us to work on are multifold. While we continue to work on this, and of course the very integral and important aspect of having trained manpower, aware manpower and skilled manpower, so that we arrest the leaks in the field in terms of wastages, reclaim and make it more sustainable. That continues the battle on. Last but not the least, when we do policy making or when we do regulations, the business sensibilities for manufacturers like us, which is an important aspect in terms of how we serve the product life cycle with an innovation or with policy changes which is inbuilt into the process, also becomes important for us to become sustainable in the long run. So this is a summary from me. Thank you.
Thank you. So now I think we are done with the industry one, and then I think we should take comments before we go into another R&D or academia. I can see.
Gufran, I think that some of the other comments coming from folks will be interactive with industry and will probably want their response. So
So that's what I am thinking, that now we will take I can see Anita, and after that Phil. So Anita, can you comment?
Yes, hello. Yep. So I wanted to shift a little bit towards what we were speaking about yesterday, which is starting some atmospheric measurements for some of these gases that we're talking about. And I think it's something that, while we have people in the room that obviously are experts in the field that are making these things, that are using these things, it's very interesting to hear your perspective and thoughts on how, is that something that is interesting to you, to think about how we might measure that in the atmosphere to really benchmark what is being emitted? But the second thing is, I can see that there's lots of changes that are happening in the industry in terms of policies and other things that we've shifted in refrigerants. The atmospheric measurements are, again, a way that can be used to see whether those policies are really having this measurable impact, right? So you can see these changes as they happen in time. So I just wanted to put that out there, maybe hear from Yogesh about how we can really get that off the ground and how we can support India, you, Yogesh, in getting that off the ground. And also hear from industry on whether, that's a really interesting and valuable way to work with you on this.
Thanks, Anita. And I think maybe I'll ask you Steve to chime in too, because I think there's some various examples of how the information may be of great interest to industry, coming from some of the examples we hinted at we showed yesterday, but I think maybe to repeat them today might be helpful.
Okay, so now.
Go next. Thank you very much. Very interesting talks that have been going on. It's been really interesting. So to me, it all comes about this low-hanging fruit that people have been talking about. How do you know what your low-hanging fruit is? And I think that's where the focus of measurements have worked within the UK. So the UK example where they had an inventory estimate of HFC 134A, which through measurements they slowly reduced those estimates, so they now know that is less of a low-hanging fruit. So understanding what your emissions are within India is really helpful to drive policy and to understand where you need to put the focus on your efforts to reduce greenhouse gases.
Thank you. Steve? That was a Steve. Yeah, so
Steve's coming.
yeah, that's what Steve is this. Steve, please, right.
Okay, yeah, thanks. I wanted to just remind folks about one thing that we found. When you think globally about the Montreal Protocol and the success it's had in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, I think this was discussed yesterday. The work that we've done over the US to quantify ozone-depleting substance emissions and HFC emissions has shown that the trends in emissions for those gases have been significant with regard to trends in emissions of the main greenhouse gases like CO2, methane, and N2O over recent years. And so it's important to remember that these other chemicals, while their contribution currently is fairly small relative to the main greenhouse gases, at least in the US, it can have significant impacts on the trends that we're seeing. And so we're quantifying in a way that's as robust as you could hope to get it, so that when you go to say that your trends for these emissions are changing owing to a combination of different gases and different policies, will be on the firmest footing possible. And in addition to that, Phil mentioned the SF6 issue yesterday. To reiterate that just a little bit, through the EPA's efforts to work with industry, there was substantial pressure on the industry to work towards reducing emissions, and together, bringing those communities together to try to have success in limiting emissions of this very powerful greenhouse gas. And I think that combination of communities, along with the atmospheric science inversion results, really, as Phil mentioned yesterday, pointed to some unusual, unrecognized mitigation opportunities related to the seasonality in what we were able to derive for emissions. And so just to remind folks of those opportunities and other reasons why estimated emissions for F gases, for industrial gases, that those things have been, we found them, those efforts to be successful in those other realms. And so I just wanted to bring that and remind folks of those issues.
Okay, thank you. I think we go to the next discipline, and so first academia and R&D, and then I understand that person from IIT is leaving soon. So I just request Sachin Gunter from IIT Madras to briefly tell your views, which can go as recommendations also, and how IIT is academia cooperation in this endeavor.
Thank you, Professor Baik. Just like to add that through the perspective of IIT, that what we can bring into the table, particularly for my industry friends, is that we have a very strong ecosystem in IIT Madras, and some of you are probably aware of it in terms of the research park, where we have a very strong encouragement for any sort of a startup which can lead towards the research-based policy or research-based product development. So I would really like to follow with the industry partner on that. How do we basically take that up in terms of the very strong IIT Madras and the industry partnership? That's one thing. The second thing is also we do definitely have an expertise that somebody was talking about the IPR, intellectual property rights. I'll not go into the details of that now, but then we do have a very specific cell at IIT Madras where we can bring it onto the table through the expertise which we have here. The second thing which I also emphasized yesterday very quickly, that if it can be formalized to a working group, Professor Baik can explore that possibility further to how to basically meet that. And in terms of the measurement, as I said, what I can think of at this moment, that once we kind of go ahead with this, and we do have some sort of an infrastructure to start the measurements on our own. So if that kind of a thing falls in line, then maybe I'll be in touch with the members and then try to see out that what kind of a measurement basically we would really like to start, because I think we were talking about the lowest hanging fruit. In my opinion, one of the lowest hanging fruits would be that the academia institutions, those like for example Yogesh is there already having some sort of an infrastructure, then how we from the academic side, apart from helping the industry, where I believe that we have some sort of an advantage being in IIT to directly interact with the industry partner and then provide them what they need. But on the academic side, what I do believe, whatever the infrastructure which we have, and then how we can really support that in terms of starting any sort of a measurement, that we would really be very happy to contribute on those particular aspects. With this, I would really like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to be here. Thank you, Professor Baik.
Thank you, Sachin. Maybe we can have a very brief about Tuhin Mandal from National Physical Laboratory, another R&D organization of national importance.
Yesterday, I have already reiterated that the first point for the industry point of view. I may have some queries from the industry too, basically, before giving my perspective. But do the industry has the emission information based on the time? Because what concentration do you basically put the gases in the particular AC, how they are basically measured, and then who is basically certifying that gases will be there. This is basically my specific part, because when you go for a concentration in the atmosphere, this specific point should be basically clear that in a AC, what concentration you are basically doing, and with the time, how is basically the decaying point of view, what are the emission factor, or emission is the basically part. And apart from that, I will basically, since it's our organization is CSIR. CSIR is basically comes from scientific industrial research. We strongly interact with this industry, and as I said that although we have a huge number of the measurement sites where we are doing the measurement, they are not either. This is basically merely a R&D purpose. Probably it's a very small personal group. They are doing the measurement and they are basically publishing the papers, not as a whole. This trust deficit, or basically the concept of the basically your reporting or going to the international forum, the major deficit comes from the basically the quality of the data. So those who are publishing the papers, they are basically happy that they are doing the publishing papers. But when we go for the as a whole from in India, we must first talks about the quality of the data, and that trust can becomes only basically of the standards. So NPL, as I said that, goes for the standards. So NPL has already a strong group for the giving the gases and all the standard gases. One measurement also available. So NPL can contribute or CSL can contribute in I think it has already contributed, but still it can contribute for the accurate and precise measurement of the data. And we are in touch with the BIPM and NPL UK for all kind of calibrations are part, and we are hoping that we can the different organizations are taking the gases standards from us for the regular, not day-to-day purpose, but for the calibration purpose. But even then, we can help them in this particular forum. How the quality of the data can be checked and how the quality of the data can be achieved, so that these center observations, which are basically Dr. Tiwari yesterday has presented, it could be visible to the world. And another point I will say that the international community, that basically the one umbrella is GO. So probably if we try to have interaction with this kind of forum, that what are the basically the lacuna of basically Indian sites and under requirement, and if that lacuna is basically matched, basically removed, then we probably can our map will be visible to the world community. That's basically my submission.
Thank you, Twain. I think we have a person with us who is called as a satellite person, Professor Dadwal. And I think we will really enrich a lot of things from having his experiences. Yesterday we didn't speak. So he has a vast, I think he is one of the best person who has a remote sensing satellite, how to, crunching the data from satellite. And so we'd like to hear Professor Dadwal.
Thank you, Professor Boyd. I was just wondering, the lack of visibility may be one due to lack of any long-term measurement site. So this has been an issue, that there have been sporadic and sites are moved one place to other. So that is one. If we can sort of get long-term, so people can see the variation over time. The second part, in addition to the data quality and that, would remain that maybe more than one method should be used. That is something. So, in addition to whatever we think is that analytic technique, if we are able to do a full spectra measurement and archive, so that we can go back and look at the data. Since I'm not sure whether any from space at the moment we can make those measurements, but I just wanted to sort of, with the people who do not look at the satellite data, that a commercial company which owns the GHG satellite it actually has on the market a product which they can, from large point sources from space, they can monitor roughly at 50-meter resolution. So the GHG sat website, etc. are there. So those interested can look at it. The one good thing about what is happening in space is that one can really make a small satellite CubeSat, and new sensors of smaller size, so basically 50 kg class of satellites, etc., can be made. Since India has opened the space sector I would seriously urge the sensor people, the engineering people and space people to really aim at, space-based monitoring also. This would really, it may not happen in the ODS or that case, but methane, etc., are I think, where you have large and spread and annually and seasonally varying sources. At that time, I think such type of things will be there. We may not be able to pick a very weak and diffuse source, but peak sources definitely. And so that peak source plus the urban concentrated areas, both would be able to detect it. Right? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Adwal. Before we go to the next, I see two hands raised, quite long time, Phil. So Phil, briefly you mentioned, and then after that, Alistair.
Thank you, President. So, first I want to just thank our colleague who just brought the satellite discussion back into the mix. When I gave my presentation yesterday, I started by talking about a multi-tiered observing strategy approach. Based on the question, we look at what data is available from satellite, from aircraft, from ground surface-based. This is the approach we have to take. And so, and by the way, the GHG side is very interesting. There's also the carbon mapper, private effort for small satellites that I suggest our colleague have a look at. It's very interesting, maybe a little more powerful, even than the GHG side approach for methane. But what I wanted to do is come back to our industry colleagues who are with us in this whole discussion about how we work together. You know, we want to remember work for this hybrid approach, advancing both the bottom up together with bringing in the atmospheric constraint, the top down. And why is that? Because the value that the atmosphere brings is a new layer of information. It's both for the known unknowns. In other words, you know, wanting to kind of refine our estimates of emissions for imported chemicals. But it's also the unknown unknowns. The surprises that we see, like the SF6 example, you know, we're constantly being surprised by things like this, and we assume we have a good first guess coming from the activity data and the emission factors, but sometimes we're very surprised. And so I wanted to come back to the industry colleagues in the room and reflect together on how they think this more granular, more frequent, better spatial coverage, temporal information. When we take a sample with flasks and analyze them with GCMS, we're getting such a rich diversity of chemicals. We can find things that we didn't expect to be there. We can learn things about what the trends are that are surprising to us. And that's one thing. And then the other thing I wanted to mention again is, remember I mentioned about not just with inside India, but you know, there's a big industry out there right now. It's a different kind of industry. It's not cooling industry, but it's also an industry that's delivering information about air quality, for example, all around the world, sensors and analysis systems. And I think this is another kind of industry that we translate in a public-private partnership and a research and industry partnership to scale up the ability to deliver information. That's another kind of industry that we might want to introduce into the mix of discussion. But the first one I want to not leave this room today without hearing from the industry people about what they think may be of value coming from this hybrid top-down, bottom-up approach for understanding the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns of gases that are coming in these appliances and what's leaking and where is it the big opportunity to reduce and transition to the new GWP, lower GWP refrigerants. So we can have a little bit more reflection from you, so that would be great.
Alistair, and then Rajan Shande, and then Alistair, can you hear? Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to re-emphasise the support I have for the previous speaker about the long-term measurements is so useful in terms of understanding the trends of these gases and how they're varying over time. I think that's a really important point. And if you don't start measuring now, you can't measure in 10 years' time. You can do your models later, but the measurements now is so important. That's what we found in the UK. And then the other thing is that the whole idea of using multiple methods to crack the nut, in effect. So that includes modelling, but also measurements. Different techniques are very important, very powerful. We found that in the DSD example for East Asia. Multiple models were applied and came with similar answers, not the same, and that gained a lot more confidence in what was happening. And then coming back to yesterday, in this, the Yogesh was saying about the Bhopal site looks absolutely fantastic as a first place to start measuring.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so now Rajan Shande, briefly.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I did hint at a number of possibility and recommendations during my presentation, but this is I'm going to talk to about, I would call it the issue about gaps. And I could clearly see from the world map, which was shown by the film, which showed that there is a huge gap between Japan, Korea, and Africa. The whole Indian subcontinent, or we typically call as a South Asia, is without any monitoring station at all. I mean, in such situation where we are saying that climate disaster is on a doorstep, and you open the door and the flood will come in, and when we say that we have an immediate solution possibility of SLCP, we don't have a monitoring station. I mean, this needs to be pointed out to the where's the authority in Government of India to say that let's not depend on any technological or financial help from WMO or other institutes or other meteorological organizations. We put our money to put up the stations to understand what exactly is happening. That's the point number one. Point number two, there is also a gap, which I call it a Himalayan gap. And that Himalayan gap is sandwiched between China and India. The world knows two poles, Arctic and Antarctic. But I know that some of the scientists are calling there is a third pole, which is called as Himalaya. So it is not only the melting of the ice or snow in the Arctic or Antarctic, is a melting of snow in Himalaya is going to affect the largest countries in the world, China and India. Because there will be floods, there will be destruction of agriculture, the human life and the biodiversity, all is going to get affected, and I think we should have a more density of stations there. Because I see several activities in European monitoring stations, North American monitoring stations, and Steve Motsaka can correct me in that, but we are neglecting monitoring stations in Himalaya foothills or on the top of the Himalaya. There is a report which warns that by eliminating SLCP, Arctic snow melting can be reduced by, I don't remember it exactly, Steve probably would be able to remind me, but maybe the rate will reduce by 2/3, and maybe the temperature will be reduced on Arctic and Antarctic by half. If that is a result of the measurement, why we not take the measurements of the Himalayan foothills? And I remember my MPL friend talking
yesterday that he had measured such things in Himalaya. So why we don't continue that? So these are the topics of gaps I think we should immediately fill in, because two things: the scientific capability, scientific strength of India is now beyond any doubt. And I don't think we should neglect this area, where the catastrophe is approaching us, but we don't know, we are not able to measure it. Yes, we are getting a good capability of measuring the hurricanes and the floods and the ocean tides, but we are not getting this, which is going to come maybe in 20 years, 25 years, or maybe even earlier. That's the one thing. Second thing which I want to mention about the industry is about utilizing various refrigerants. Godrej said that they have done 100% changeover from HFCs. So probably there should be some kind of a networking done to find out why other industries are not able to do that, and what is the constraint for that. Maybe the standards, maybe the flammability, and probably Godrej probably need to answer or probably share the information how they are getting over that issue. So probably the sub-network of industry, which also I hinted last my presentation, can also go in. I have other suggestions which I can exchange by email.
Thank you very much, Arunji. Now I think Dr. Tejal from National Institute of Advanced Studies, she has been a member of Indian delegation to COP. So we can in fact consider that as a government views on other things. So
let me just say at the beginning that I don't speak on behalf of the government of India unless there is a brief. I've been longer in the COP, so I am speaking in my capacity as an academic, very much a member of NIAS, but not really this. I must say that this should not be considered as the government of India view. I think that was fairly clearly expressed by government spokespersons themselves yesterday. So let me just say that I may sound a bit contrarian. Far away from the mic. Okay, sorry. So I want to just speak to this concept of what can be measured, can be managed, and of course in the context of weather monitoring, atmospheric monitoring stations that provide early warning systems, etc. These monitors are very much there. I think Professor Shende spoke about it towards the end of his intervention just now, and these are very important. They have contributed tremendously in managing impacts of climate change and of course extreme weather across the world, and definitely in South Asia as well. And India has definitely been at the forefront of this. But in the context of climate change, I'm not really I'm not very convinced that we can not manage what cannot be measured, or measurement is really the barrier. Right? It is not our lack of ability to measure CO2 which has been an obstacle in reducing it over the last 30 years. Reducing CO2, which is the main driver in this sense for climate change, has been a real challenge because the energy sources that drive CO2 emissions are so fundamental to the way in which modern societies and production within them is structured and organized. It would not be accurate, in my opinion, to say that climate inaction, in addressing the problem that we have over the last 30 years, and the lack of action under the Kyoto Protocol has been because we have not been able to measure the problem, and not because major historical and current emitters walked out of the Kyoto Protocol. So I think putting acknowledging the correct reasons for why we have seen lack of action, I think, is important here. The importance of developing capacities in meteorology, there is no doubt about it. I think we've spoken about how vulnerable sections of society as well as the most vulnerable sectors of the economy this becomes really important for. But I think the role of measuring GHGs in a bottom-up manner can no doubt be enhanced by top-down monitoring initiatives. However, there are some advantages of bottom-up measurement that are in fact critical to managing GHGs, which in itself also is a bottom-up process. And I think we've heard this across statements that were made from our colleagues from the industry here. In measuring some of this the hard way from the bottom up, with all its attendant uncertainties and difficulties, we get valuable insights into both the challenges in managing GHGs as well as the potential opportunities that exist on the ground. This doesn't in any way mean that we must not develop other ways that can complement this bottom-up measurement. But I think we must be clear that the role must be complementary and not one of replacement. And I say this, I think most people in the meeting have said this, that it's a complementary, it complements the bottom-up process. But I want to emphasize this because there have been public statements made, again, and I was at COP27, over there was a big discussion on this as to how G-cost, for example, is aimed at eventually replacing the nationally or party-driven process of inventory making. This is therefore a serious policy discussion, and we must have this discussion and what implications it has, because these implications can be far-reaching. And I just want to end with one last point, that there has been a lot of discussion since yesterday about lessons from the Montreal Protocol that should be applied in the case of climate. I think there is no doubt that the Montreal Protocol is a remarkable example of successful global collective action to manage a problem in the global commons. Even though we're not taught this in these exact terms, I think this is very much the spirit in which the success of the Montreal Protocol has been discussed. And there are very important lessons that we must learn from it. However, I think we need to acknowledge that the nature of the problems are very, very different, even though they may seem very similar, both in terms of scale of the sectors and production processes that need to change, as well as the nature of the solutions that are available, and even theoretically or technologically possible for both. The coming together of scientists, experts in chemistry, industrial leaders, and governments to address the problem is very appreciable in the context of the Montreal Protocol. But we have seen this kind of coming together even for climate change. In fact, the IPCC process itself is an amazing effort in international scientific collaboration. The WMO itself has done a lot of work in this respect of bringing people together across different disciplines across the world. However, it remains a fundamental problem because you require a transformational rejigging of the energy systems that drive modern production and life itself, and that too in a highly and starkly unequal world, which makes the challenge exponentially harder. So I think we might be reducing the complexity of the problem that we are facing with climate change by saying that we can implement our lessons as they are from the Montreal Protocol to climate change. We must, I think, upfront acknowledge the wickedness of the problem of managing GHGs, because CO2 again, whether it is a pollutant or whether it is a resource, still remains a question which is contested. The UNFCCC very much considers it both. And so I think this I may have put the cat amongst the pigeons, but I think it is important to perhaps take a broader view of this and then talk about what is the role of atmospheric measurements then in the context of all GHGs, where these measurements must be concentrated, where they may provide the most complementarity with measurements to bottom-up efforts, and efforts at GHG management. I think that would be a useful starting point. Thank you.
Thank you, Tejal. So before we open up for our colleagues from NGOs, I just wish to request Dr. Yogesh Tiwari from IIT in Pune to make few.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Beg. I think today, just we are listening about all sort of discussions related to.
Come a little closer to the mic.
Yeah. So I will just come on the point, just pinpoint that. See, from entire discussions, it is coming up that there is a huge gap in measurements, in observations, modeling. And some work has been already done on a bottom-up modeling, but as Phil showed that there is a huge gap in top-down modeling. So I think in the proposal, in the final proposal, I would advise, because we are very fortunate that we have world leaders in modeling like Anita Ganeshan, and observation like Steve Monska and then Alistair Manning. So they are really leading in observation in the globe. So I would like to propose that we should have like a joint consortium with the modelers and observation people, even for the calibration, like Dr. Mandal is sitting here from the NPL. So the measurement, calibration, quality control, and then the modelers, the input, and then later we can bring industry partners on board, that how we can help them, what exactly input they need from us, so that they can come on board and then they can suggest us. And also we have to then finally, because in entire focus, what I'm thinking, that we should not exactly focus that yes, we will only help to policymakers, but we have to help the science also. So we have to work for the science, and of course the policymakers will take out our science and then they can utilize on that. So this is all my side. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Abesh. So now colleagues from TERI, NRDC, CEW would like to speak on this.
So thank you for giving the opportunity. So an interesting conversation for us. While we've been part of this program since yesterday, we are not the ones who measure the data, frankly speaking, but we work very closely with the government on these issues, and possibly we are the policy connect and the dissemination and the outreach connect to this whole discussion that I'm overhearing over here. So some key points that possibly I take back home with me, and we can find ways in terms of how we can contribute to the working group that is likely to be constituted. So first and foremost, what I take back is the whole issue of data gaps that has been discussed over here, and of course the need to plug the holes. And what are the steps for that? And with regard to plug these holes, what are the roles that different stakeholders basically play in the process in terms of filling that information gap up? So what are the role of scientists, the industry, the private sector, and academia in this process of helping build this information up? Of course, there is value of long-term measurements and multiple methods for increasing the confidence levels, as that was indicated before. I think what is also important is with regard to the quality of the data that is being collected, the standards, the forms and formats that are basically being used, the templates of the data collection and how do they contribute to the overall MRV framework, and the larger compliance mechanisms that exist for the country. So I would try to link all that up, and definitely that is an area where TERI works directly with regard to both the mitigation and the adaptation side. This leads us to the broader question of who are we talking about and whether people are equipped to report back in those formats or understand what they're doing at their levels. So we link it up to the whole issue of capacity building and the need for training of trainers, where people need to be exposed to standards, frameworks, methods by way of which all this needs to be done. So there's a whole area of development there where possibly organizations can get together, develop these templates, frameworks, and conduct many trainings by way of which to different stakeholders, by way of which data can be collected and reported back. I do understand the challenges by the industry, because we work very closely with the industry, and of course we house the Center for Cooling Technologies at TERI, and this whole area of IPR and patents, also the extent to which industry can report on efficiencies, and the point raised by the colleague from the private sector earlier with regard to policy incentives that can be provided to promote the industry to take up these challenges. I think these are clear areas where we would like to work with the industry in terms of trying to provide the policy connects and the support that we can with regard to enhancing industry efficiency and the reporting on mitigation challenges. we have been working very closely with some of the industry players, contributing to the air conditioning and refrigeration industry with regard to building their platforms, one on the technology side in terms of improving their efficiency, but two on the policy side with regard to looking at what kind of policy structures can be established to support the industry. We've also been working in terms of helping the industry in terms of trainings that can be organized for service technicians, and these are clear areas where possibly we see a role that we can play with regard to contribution to any program that is being structured. So it's more with the stakeholders, more with the users, more with the policymakers, but connecting all the different stakeholders together to ultimately get the action moving and implementation happen. So that would clearly be our role in terms of, how we would like to contribute. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Anyone else wish to? Oh, yes, Dr. Swami, in fact, I forgot, he is more of a government representative. In science.
Just to supplement what Yogesh said, actually, most of our stations right now are basically regional category stations. If we leave apart the Hanley, if it is working at all. We have recently established one GHG monitoring facility in East Himalaya, and the station is called Rani Chauri. This will be part of the WMO Go program, and data will be made available through GoCC. And already, for last more than 60 years, we are submitting data, monitored ozone data to WUDC. So in the similar manner, this data will be made available through WMO. And we have plans to monitor the ODS also, but not sure when it will come up. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Soni. I think now comments. Next 15 minutes, we will spend on next step and draft recommendation. Before I hand over mic to Phil, I think we all would like to hear from Dr. Shailesh Nayak, Director of NIAS, to his views that this is the most important part, that next step in draft recommendation. I think how we should guide us about that particular aspect.
Thank you, Fran, and thank you very much. It has been extremely good discussion, and a lot of new thinking has come. Now, if you look from, many has said about policy and all. If you look from policy makers and decision makers, there are 4 things which is very important. There may be 5 also, but I think immediately comes to my mind about 4 major issues where policy makers are concerned because it affects human being. One is, of course, acid rain, the smog which happens in many parts of the world, ozone depletion, and greenhouse gases. Now, we have discussed mostly related to ozone and the greenhouse gases. We have a pretty good understanding about ozone depletion. I am not going to say much about that, and the necessary actions will be taken, and probably after these next 30-40 years, we may have a solution. Now, as far as greenhouse gases, which we have been discussing a very small part of the overall greenhouse gases, and the lot of discussion on the measurements, how it has to be done, I fully agree. But this, we need to look at in totality, in the sense that we cannot look only at HFC or methane without carbon dioxide. We have to look greenhouse gas, because when you go to the policy maker, he is not going to say with a narrow. Any policy is to be made it will be made for the greenhouse gases as such. So we need a very good theoretical understanding about all the three aspects, the carbon dioxide or methane or HFC and other. So that connection I didn't find coming very loud and clear into this. So we will have to establish that for to do that theoretical understanding, whatever measurements are to be made, the way the measurement has to be calibrated, I agree with all such things. And whether you make from satellite or an aircraft or a ground, it doesn't matter, but we should be able to have a very clear understanding of this. Now, once we say that these measurements are made and we have understood what is happening, that is also not enough. We will also have to suggest a solution, and some of those things we did discuss about that. You replace X with Y or Y with Z or etc. Now, those solutions, do they need any change in the existing policy? Now, many times we say that the policy, but if there is no need for any change in the existing policy, because nobody says, there is nowhere says that it should not be done. What is needed if we called a policy is to use, instead of A gas, use a B gas. That is what our purpose. Or our purpose is to look at the entire gamut of the greenhouse gases and see. I think we should be very clear before we go to the policymakers on this, because if you go with a very narrow kind of thing, I am not very sure that they would be appreciative of that. And we should be very clear that what if we want a change in the policy, what is that change we want? And what is the solution which we are offering? Only showing them a data is not going to be of any use. Because for them the data is not very critical as it is for with us. We may think the data is very critical, but for them, they say, okay, I know there is a problem, but you tell me what I should do. And if I said I want to measure this, that they are not interested. So we must focus on, because we have to suggest a solution, so we need to have an understanding, and to have an understanding, we want to have a measurement. I think first, let us concentrate on that aspect. And then if we have a solution, then we go to a policymaker and say that these are the changes which we want. I don't think this is the kind of knowledge which we have, which I saw in last 2 days, is not sufficient to go to any policymaker. And that's my view, but I may be corrected if any other view is there. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your words of wisdom. And you'll take now. Floor is yours, Phil.
Thank you, my dear friend. Practical steps to take. We talk about users and stakeholders for the information that we can deliver. There's a very practical one. When you look around the world right now, in terms of both the Paris Agreement and the Montreal Protocol, the interface with that world of negotiators and national representatives are the inventory compilers. They are the front line. They have been looked to for the detailed information about where we currently are and to deliver scenarios of where we seem to be going. They are our frontline partners, potential users. We need to do the relationship building with that community. We were very fortunate to have many of those folks in the room with us yesterday, and I think perhaps still some of them today. We need to build trust there that we truly do have with the atmospheric layer of information, valuable information to work in partnership with them. Remember, there is no truth. While the atmosphere does contain the truth, it doesn't give up its secrets very easily. And so, both the emission estimates from atmospheric measurement and analysis and the estimates coming from activity data and emission factors both have strengths and weaknesses. And we need to understand each other across that community. So one of our jobs going forward will be to strengthen those partnerships, build trust. I think we heard yesterday and again today that the best near-term opportunity will be with the F-gases because of the fact that they're more straightforward in not having natural sources and sinks. And so I think there's a low-hanging fruit there. And we don't have to worry about the bigger policy value propositions for now. Let's take baby steps. Let's start with building the trust with our partners in the inventory compounding community, and take, for example, the work that Alistair Manning's involved in the UK and Anita Gunnison. They have strong partnership with their inventory compounding community, and good things have come from that. Steve Monska and I have been working now for the past year with our inventory compounders at US EPA, starting to build that relationship. In Switzerland, they are doing it. But other than that, there's really not many examples of a success story there. So India can jump to the head of the parade by building up that case study inside India to show that value proposition so that the ministers will get the information again where they always got it from that inventory compounding community, but now with some improved estimates because of our partnership with them. So we have to demonstrate our value, and that would be a great accomplishment to begin with. It's a baby step, it seems, but it's actually hard work and quite a lot to do. And I think the larger policy value will come over time. We don't know exactly always when it's going to be or how it's going to be, but I know it will come, especially if we succeed with that first step. So that's my opening intervention for the beginning of our plan, our white paper going forward.
So, Phil, you have to lead. What next?
What do you think?
What I feel that you have to lead this particular session.
Okay. So, to continue then, I think that the next step, as I mentioned earlier, is we're going to take our notes. I have many notes assembled today. If others who are participating have notes from the discussions, I think the panels were extremely rich. I'm going to go, fortunately, GoFront has established a YouTube link where we have the full meeting captured. And I'm going to take my notes and take some time to reflect in detail where I want to fill in my gaps in my note-taking. And then working with the core group organizing the meeting, we'll create a first draft that we will then circulate with the larger meeting for comments and additions to the draft. And so we'll perhaps create a Google Drive and share an email list share so that we can get an ongoing collaboration with this really wonderful, diverse group of folks. I'm so grateful to everybody who's taken the time out of their busy lives to come to this meeting in person, and and also online. But we have to move quickly to capture the energy here in the room. So I know that Gufran has already meetings coming up next week with folks in important ministries in Delhi. And I think we want to have a first draft as soon as possible to carry these messages forward. So I think, we have our work cut out. First to do the initial draft, and then to get the input in that draft from the folks who've been so wonderfully engaged over the last day and a half of this meeting. So that's pretty much it. What am I missing, Gufran, and anyone else who would like to add to what I just said?
Yeah, so now this is a chance to make last point comment for next 10 minutes. We will break for lunch.
No, I think what Phil has made a suggestion is very good. I think let us first concentrate on that improve our understanding of this issue, and for that whatever measurements has to be made. I think let us first concentrate on that. Once we have that, and then we do the next part.
Yeah.
And we can put some time limits if we want, and then and there are many measurements are made. We have seen that. I think we need to synthesize whatever information is available as of now, and what exactly it tells us, whether it improves our understanding or not, because many work which is being done in different places. Let us put them together and see whether our understanding is improving about this. Once we are satisfied that this understanding is sufficient and we would be able to offer a solution, then we could go to the next. But at the same time, the long-term measurements are also extremely critical, so that we should not lose the sight of that. And I think, and the Phil also made where we should make measurements. That's the key. So
I think now when we talk about the long-term measurements, Professor Nayak, I think it's important to remember that we have good global background measurement sites, as we've heard over and over again. What we need to have is these new nodes where we're not right in the source regions, but not in the remote clean background either. We want to have sensitivity to the source regions, but not be dominated by them.
Yeah.
And so, but I think even before we think about a plan for measurements, I think we want to create this see where we are in the south here in Karnataka. It's like a funnel, and we're taking all the wonderful ideas from all of India and capturing it down at the neck of the funnel. And I think I'd like to see this remain a center of excellence here where we had this inaugural meeting. And I think it's a great opportunity for us to continue generating the powerful ideas in this great place. And I wish I had been there with you. And I will be there soon. But I think before we start thinking about all the different kinds of measurement networks and things that we can do, I think we need to capture this. We want to make a thought center, an information center of excellence coming out of this great meeting. And I think that would be a very simple step. And then I think we need to have good partners in Delhi. We need to be able to connect from the whole length of the subcontinent. We want to really make sure that we have information flow. And that's going to be an important outcome too.
Phil, I have some small suggestions, I must say, that if at all the recommendations or the suggestions from this body or the future center of excellence has to go to the government, I I think it is important to highlight two things. One is the urgency of the issue, and the second thing is the experience of other countries, how they benefited from having the measurements in terms of the societal benefit. So it comes to my mind that Steve, who has been engaged in these measurements and interacting with the government, he probably can be requested to give, not generate a paper on benefits of measurement, but how a measurement which we are thinking or the understanding that we want to gain, how that will benefit the society as a whole, whether it is a farmer, common man, industry or something. And if those kind of stories are there, that may help us in reorienting our recommendations to the government. Thank you.
So just one last point, that we would be happy from Terry to be your contact point in Delhi while you're looking out for partners. So definitely we would be interested in terms of being. We are based out of Delhi, and we have a close association with the government and working on these issues. So we would be happy to be a partner there.
Yeah, I think the issue which Phil has raised about the Center of Excellence, and we having Gufran here and many others, his colleagues, we would be very happy to host this in NIAS, and we have been working with state governments, industry in all our aspects, not only the central but also very closely interacting with the state governments, because most of the implementation is being done by the state governments or the local bodies. So that is also important, and then we may create some kind of a group where those who have an interest to join this, maybe 10, 12 institutes along with the industry and all, and meet virtually every 3 months or so, and to see that whatever recommendations comes out from this, where we have reached, what is the next step to be done. So we may have to create some kind of a structure which is continuously keeps us into this business, because I think 2 days workshop, today we will be completing 2 days, but I think in my view we should start the work now. And this is going to be a very intense work which is to be done. So we need to have a continuity in this, what we achieved in these 2 days, and maybe practically every year or so we may hold similar kind of a workshop to take this talk. So this is what my suggestion is. Yeah, Phil, you want to say?
Phil, you want to speak, or I should?
No, Phil want to say something.
Yeah, Phil. Noted.
I was just giving my Italian gestures of support for what he just said. I was going like this, thumbs up.
Yeah, so as a concluding thing, what I should say that, we have taken all the very important advices, that maybe the time to come, whatever asset in India we can have a synthesis of that, very short synthesis in a conceptual manner, which will show our strength. Then after that, that will lead that lot of things need to be done to fulfill the gap, and that is why this is the brainstorming kind of thing we have, followed by more technical session in 2023. And before that, as I understand from Phil and our Indian partner in WMO's IGS3, that you will have your own scientific steering committee where you will be making an official endorsement and discussing about what we have this. So that will have our WMO's participation endorsement that we are going in a very important and scientifically right direction.
Yes.
And yeah. So that is what is the, I think, takeaway. So probably Yogesh can take this responsibility to synthesize the observations, whatever we have. That is, as Dr. Nayak has told, that this is what will show that this is what asset we have. This is what it is conveying the message, but it is not sufficient enough to do that. So that is what we propose to do, and further we got into that.
One of the big values I think we don't want to overlook this one and all is we have the seed of a really rich, diverse consortium here. We have NGOs, we have industry, we have scientists from valuable products coming out of this, and so we want to really capture that and grow it and get the value, squeeze the juice out of this. And it's going to take work, and it's going to start with a consensus document, a short, very rich, but to the point, consensus document that will summarize the value of what we've done over the last day and a half.
Yeah. I also think it's important that when we construct the working group, to make sure and request all the stakeholders to let us know exactly what they will bring to the table and what the expectations are, because I think we need to be clear on that front to be able to succeed.
Thank you, Versus. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Versus. Yeah, and then in fact, whatever we should, while doing this, we should be very, very careful and very important that with this science important message, what is their application to the industries, how the industries people, what they want and what we can deliver to them, that should be very clear-cut things would be there. So I think with this, before I invite all of them for the lunch and say end of the day, I would like to express my sincere thanks to all of them that in such a short notice, which was really a short notice, you were invited, and then on behalf of National Institute of Advanced Studies and behalf of our director, Dr. Nayak, would like to express heartfelt greetings as well as thanks to all of you. And I know that industrial partner, there are something which is too technical for all of you, but then I think you have taken some important message with this, and then over the time to come in the future, we would like to hear your frank opinion that yes, this is what we want from all of you. We'll be very happy to receive that. With this, thank you very much once again. And I think I announce the end of the meeting of this.
Yeah,
and,
I just want to say one.
Yes, Yogesh.
Yeah, I think the big thank goes to Dr. Beg, because he is the magician, and then we planned this meeting with Phil and then everybody just maybe 3-4 months back. And then he has arranged so nicely and in a short time, and I think it's the most productive meeting I have seen. So we are going with the big message, and then we will take action, and then we'll have a follow-up. So I think Dr. Beg need a great applause. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I think, thank you very much, Phil. Yes, and all of you are invited now, and I hope all the transport